It is hard to capture how much of a surprise hit the first season of Squid Game was. It came out of nowhere and became the biggest show on the planet. The anticipation for season 2 has been so high, that wait is finally over. Today on the show, season 2 of Squid Game is here. The group chat is ready. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. I feel it. I get full body shivers when I hear this music because it immediately takes me back to the fall of 2021. It's the middle of the pandemic, and then one day it suddenly feels like everyone you know is talking about the same Netflix show. It was honestly like a rare moment of monoculture, a brief return to like when everyone was watching the same thing. And that show was Squid Game. Like, I don't think I decided, quote unquote, to watch Squid Game as much as I felt so left out that I immediately started it and I was hooked and I watched the whole thing in like a day and a half and I wanted more and then I didn't have more. And now, after 3 long years, we have season 2. Michelle Cho is here. Regina Kim is here. Kathryn VanArendonk is here. Hello, everybody. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about season 2 of Squid Game. No spoilers, of course, but welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey, me too. I'm excited.
This is going to be a great time. A nice little Boxing Day listening experience. I love this for all of us. Michelle, I'm going to start with you. When did Squid Game first get on your radar?
I started watching it, I think, the day after it premiered, because I saw it come up on my Netflix feed. Netflix algorithm knows that I like Korean content. And so I saw the very intriguing picture. But a friend who is also a huge Kdrama addict was like, you got to watch this. And so that's what led me to it.
Kathryn, what about you? When did Squid Game get on your radar? Were you like, day one, I was there?
I was not. And it was a real problem, in fact. And it was a situation where it dropped and then some of my colleagues watched it that first weekend. But it had not been on our radar at all as TV critics. There were no screeners that we knew about. The vast machinery designed to help us plan how to cover things in advance does not exist for Netflix shows that are not produced for a U.S. audience or that they don't think will appeal to a U.S. audience. And so it became a real thing where it was like this huge show has dropped. Often there are these big Netflix bumps. And so we are trying to decide, like, is this show going to fade away in a week? And so we don't actually need to cover it that much because no one's going to read about it. Or is this going to be an actual moment of monoculture, as you point out? And it took us an embarrassingly long time to like get our act together and really start covering it to the extent that it really deserved. And it has continually been frustrating for us because it's not like anything has been fixed about the situation the first time. So,
but I want to hold on that for a moment because I think that's significant. Like the idea that you and your colleagues, like you work at Vulture, literally the job is to stay as current as possible
100%.
on culture, on film, on television that is coming out. But something about the mechanisms that make shows available and make shows sort of like known seems to have failed the show. And I think like that, at least at the start of when it first came out. That's an important thing. I want to come back to that in just a minute. But I think maybe let's situate people a little bit more in what Squid Game is. Regina, in case people sort of miss the experience of watching Squid Game season 1, which I don't know anybody who did, let's start with like this premise. Because the premise is people, adults, playing a bunch of childhood games for a chance to win a lot of money. And then they're willing to die trying, because it's such a large pot of money. What do you think it was about a premise like that one that makes everybody go, yes, this is the show I need to watch?
Well, I mean, I think this show, really explores just how far people are willing to go to get rich and to have a better chance at life. And so, I think that's something that most of us can really relate to. I mean, growing income inequality is something that's a huge problem, not just in South Korea, but in other parts of the world. And we also have to remember that this show came out during the pandemic, right? And so in countries like the US, many people lost their jobs during the pandemic. And then for people who still had their jobs, it was really like the ones who had a white collar, high paying jobs that could afford to work from home, while, the frontline workers had to get out there and basically risk their lives during a pandemic. And so like I think that just like, made everyone really relate to some of these themes of income inequality that the show was exploring at the time.
We now know that the show is Netflix's most popular original series ever. 111 million viewers watched the show during the first month of its release, which is like a pretty staggering number. That's Netflix's number. You can take that with a grain of salt if you wish, because we don't know how they count those views. But that's also important to sort of like contextualize. Like that's a gigantic number. It was the number one show, not in one country, not in 10 countries. It was the number one show in 90 countries. Michelle, beyond the story itself, what do you think helped make the show such a big hit?
Yeah, there's I guess two things I want to talk about. Like the power of the platform to create something that like brings people together and like the nowness of it, the fact that everyone's around the world is watching the same show, I think creates such a different experience than just consuming content, right?
Yeah.
So that's attributable, I think, to the power that Netflix has as this like company that's really trying to kind of take over the world in a lot of ways. But the other thing that I think is unique about the show, what it pointed to, is that a lot of people were watching so much Korean content during the pandemic because it was a period of time in which a lot of other industries got shut down. And so, some of the biggest hits that have really made now Korean content sort of common knowledge, or even for folks who hadn't had this history of being fans of Korean media, those productions came out in 2021. You know why? Because they were still ongoing. They were never shut down by
Korea never stopped
a
producing,
lockdown. Exactly. So it's kind of this, there was a historical accident element to what made Squid Game such a huge phenomenon, but that the effects of that kind of continue to today.
Kathryn, I want to play you a clip of Ted Sarandos, who's the CEO of Netflix. I know. I want you to hear him talking on stage in Seoul recently at a world premiere event for Squid Game Season 2.
For many people, Squid Game was the very first Korean show they'd ever seen. And now, over 80% of Netflix members around the world watch K content.
80% of all Netflix subscribers watch Korean shows. Last year, Netflix announced it would spend $2.5 billion on Korean content over the next 4 years or so. When you look at the success of Squid Game, like the ways that Squid Game has maybe changed Netflix's relationship to Korea, what stands out for you, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, I have screeners for Squid Game Season 2. This is
they made it to you.
They gave them, which is like, this is the tiniest little piece of evidence. But from my perspective, inside the mechanisms of how they try to create excitement for these things, that is a very basic fact of like whether this is an organization that understands the value of what this is, or whether they have no idea and have not given any kind of resources to publicity. It is a very, very different world for Squid Game Season 2 than it was for Season 1. And so that's huge. I think the other thing that I have seen, from Vulture readership, from sort of what my colleagues and I are watching, we see a lot more interest in Korean content, and particularly actually for our readers, reality shows. Korean reality shows are a huge part of sort of what how the world has changed in the last couple of years. I do think it continues to be fascinating that although Squid Game has changed the landscape for Korean shows, the rest of the world, like, it's not like then they have been like, wow, we should see whether there's also great shows being made in Mexico, because there are, but we don't have any access to those screens. Like, it just is still a very uneven platform.
Regina, what about you? What stands out for you when you think about the success of Squid Game? Also, Kathryn just mentioned the success of Korean reality shows. Culinary Class Wars was a huge hit this year, just like a few months ago. And so this is like a recent example of like, oh yeah, everybody was kind of like talking about that. But Regina, what stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, working as an entertainment journalist, I have noticed that ever since Squid Game, became such a huge success in 2021, it's been a lot easier for me to pitch editors at various mainstream media outlets, articles related to K-dramas. And I have to say that like maybe for the first year or so after Squid Game came out, I had to tie everything, like all of my pitches to Squid Game, even it was like the most random connection ever. But like, I would say like every time I mentioned Squid Game in my pitch, the editor was like, okay, yeah, we'll take it. But, thankfully I will say that like maybe starting like since like last year or so, like I have no longer had to do that. So I can just, leave out any mention of Squid Game, because I think by now, like every editor that I work with, like they know just how popular K-dramas are. And so it's a relief to me to like, not have to mention Squid Game every time. And if anything, I mean, you mentioned culinary class wars. So like one of my editors, like, they actually wanted our team, like someone on our team to write about it. And so like I raised my hand. I was like, all right, I'll write an article about it for Forbes. So now it's like, editors are coming to me and like assigning me articles about K-dramas. And I'm like, I don't have the time. Well, I do have the time, but I just have to like prioritize.
Yeah, but also like that's a healthy indicator, right? Like of like the idea of like this just such like a wide berth of kind of interest. Michelle, just real quick to you, what do you make of the reaction to the success of Squid Game?
I mean, I can just report, I think, some consternation or ambivalence that is held by a lot of people in the Korean industry, which is, yes, Netflix has been an amazing platform, but at what point do they start to be kind of exploiting Korean content, extracting most of the profits, which was the case with Squid Game, and kind of riding the popularity of Korean content as a brand, as a national brand or a cultural brand, without really distributing the gains from that. So there's a lot of concern that Netflix owns too much of the IP. And so people want to come up with their own streaming platforms that can kind of keep some of those resources at home a bit more.
My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. I'm talking to Michelle Cho and Regina Kim and Kathryn VanArendonk about Squid Game because season 2 just dropped on Netflix. Kathryn, I gotta say, I did a double take when the Golden Globe nominations came out because Squid Game has a nomination for Best TV Drama before season 2 has even premiered. I mean, I know people are listening to this conversation on December 26th. We've recorded a couple of weeks before December 26th. I think that's important to acknowledge. But the idea that it's up for a Best Drama Golden Globe before the rest of the world has had a chance to see it, a little bit of a funny thing, but also you've had the screeners for a little while. Without any spoilers, Kathryn, what do you think of season 2?
So season 2, I think, will be satisfying for people who are hopeful about more of this world. The major concern in second seasons is that they're really hard. They are this balance of wanting to give people the thing that they liked the first time, but without repeating all of the same things so that they're like, oh, you only had that one idea. And particularly for a show like Squid Game, which is so reliant on that sense of surprise about how far they are willing to go, how hard things are willing to get, that like, surely they're not going to go there. And then they go like 3 miles past there. Yes. It's hard. The fear, right, is that a season 2 is going to have a hard time replicating that same sense of like, I thought I knew where the boundaries were, but they are in fact somewhere else. Yeah. And there are a lot of choices that they make in the second season about what characters to focus on, where in this world we are situated, that I think give you more sort of to grip in those sense of like, oh, the world's over here. Oh my God, it's this again. On the other hand, there are also some very familiar set pieces. And when I started to hear specific music cues again, I was like hiding under a blanket, even though I knew exactly what would happen. It was very upsetting.
Like I hear that, like that's satisfying to me. Like the idea of anticipated, anxiety, maybe being resolved ? Like I like that about Squid Game. I don't know about you. Like, is that your relationship to the show also, Regina? You kind of go, this show's going to make me anxious. It's going to be a bad time. I can't wait to enjoy some of this. Or what do you make of season 2?
So I did get the screeners as well, but I've only had a chance to watch the first episode so far.
Great.
And I have to say that the first episode alone is pretty intense, at least for me. I honestly I need to take a break afterwards because I'm like, whoa, this is just, I mean, the acting is super intense. You obviously have, two or three of Korea's most talented actors, Gong Yoo and Lee Jung-jae in the first episode, and they're like, it just gets really intense. I'll just say that. And yeah, obviously there's some gore and at least to me, for the in the first episode, I feel like the gore also looks more realistic, which is why I think for me was a lot scarier than the first
more realistic
season.
than season one? Because season one was like, this is plenty realistic for me. I'm having a bad time with every one of these shots.
Well, I don't know, maybe it was that colorful setting that most of season one took place in, but the first episode of season two, I mean, I don't want to give away any spoilers,
Please
but
don't.
the setting is very realistic. A lot of it takes place in the outside world, and so the blood that you see looks, at least to me, looks very realistic, and there's a lot of suspense, so much suspense. I actually had to take breaks in between.
Oh.
But I don't know, maybe that's just me.
No, you have to understand that when you say that to me, that's the thing that makes me excited about this show. When you say that, I go, oh, I'm going to have the best time returning to this world. And Kathryn is giving me this look, being like, yep, you sure will, pal. If that's what if that's what you want.
Yep.
Can I just add?
Yeah, of course.
Can I just add, after the end of episode one, I was like, should I watch episode two? I'm curious, but maybe I should take a break. Maybe I should watch a romantic K-drama, a rom-com. That was my mood, honestly.
That's the idea that the show is so intense that it makes you running towards the world of rom-coms is actually, that's a beautiful compliment. Also, Regina, I do want to say, you mentioned Lee Jung-jae, he plays player 456. He's returning for this season, along with Lee Byung-hun, who plays the mysterious front man. But also 15 to 16 additional cast members were on stage recently, sort of talking about the season 2 premiere event. There are some significant K-drama stars that were on that stage. Regina, do you want to talk about who was on that stage, who you're excited to sort of follow as this season unfolds for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're a K-drama fan, there are so many recognizable faces in season two. I mean, there's Lee Ji-nook, who is a very popular K-drama star. There's also Park Yu-young. People might know her from Celebrity and Sweet Home. There's Kang Han-woo, who people might know from When the Camellia Blooms. But I would say for me personally, there are two actors that I'm really excited to see in this season. The first one is Im Shi-won. He's been in K-dramas like Miseng and Run On. He plays a Myung-gi, who is this YouTuber who loses all of his money in this cryptocurrency scam. And because he's promoted the scam to his YouTube followers, some of them have also lost their money. And so he becomes a fugitive. And I thought his character sounded so interesting because, cryptocurrency scams are a huge problem in Korea. There are so many Koreans who have fallen victim to these crypto scams. And I know that this is something that director Hwang said that he wanted to highlight in this season. So that's why I think his character is very interesting. The other character that I'm really excited about is Thanos, who is the guy with the purple hair in the trailer. And Thanos is actually, one of the people who lost all his money after watching Myung-gi's YouTube channel and investing in the crypto scam. And the funny thing for me was that, Thanos is a retired rapper in this season, and he's played by none other than Top or T.O.P., who is essentially a retired rapper himself. So for people who don't know Top, his real name is Chae Seung-hyun. He's actually a former member of this super popular K-pop group called Big Bang. They're one of the most iconic K-pop groups of all time. And, Top has previously starred in some K-dramas and Korean films, but we haven't seen him act for many years. And so at least for me, I thought this was pretty cool getting to see him, in an acting role after so many years.
Michelle, also got to acknowledge that I think it's rare, I think, for a Korean show to sort of make international casting controversy headlines. But in the teasers for season 2, one character was revealed to be a trans woman played by a male actor. There's been a fair bit of criticism about why a trans actor wasn't cast in this role. Can you just talk a little bit about the context of that controversy?
For sure, yes. So there is a character who's a former soldier that's trying to play the game in order to get the funds for a gender-affirming surgery.
Yeah.
And the actor who plays this character is pretty well known, Park Sung-hoon, who recently starred in The Glory, which was a huge hit, and Queen of Tears, which was also a huge hit, both on Netflix. So he would be widely recognizable by fans who like K content. And so the criticism is, why did you choose someone who is a cis man, first of all? And
those
rather
are the headlines
than
that
a trans actor, or even a cis woman, I think for some people would have been preferable. But I will say that there's this like subtext in which this character refers to a case. It's a tragic story in which the first known transgender soldier in the South Korean military, who was a trans woman, was dismissed from her active duty after she underwent this gender reassignment surgery, and tried to kind of mount a legal challenge to it. She became a transgender activist, but unfortunately, she passed away from suicide in 2021. So it's a pretty recent case. And I really think that this character is a kind of homage to this person. And so I think people who are making the show are kind of considering this in terms of representation of sexual minorities in the South Korean context. And so that's something that is helpful to remember. The other thing that I think helps to give more background to this controversy is that, there are no anti-discrimination laws for LGBTQ plus folks in South Korea. It's a kind of battle that's being fought by activists and, people who are advocating for the community, but South Korea is still a relatively socially conservative country. And so a lot of people, I would say, think about being trans or even being queer as a mental illness or a disability. So that's kind of where the conversation is. And so there are very few trans actors or media personalities, celebrities. I can really only think of two. One who started her career in 2001 and is no longer active in South Korean media. And then another who is such an anomaly, such a standout, and such a kind of special case, who is active today and mostly active. I mean, somewhat on network TV, but mostly on YouTube and like other platforms, right? So it's really unclear to me that there would have been even the possibility of casting a trans actress in this role. So that's something that I think helps to add context to the conversation. Yeah,
I think like it's a conversation that I think absolutely needs the context in order for you to sort of like be able to grapple with it, but also it has meaning and should have meaning. Kathryn, given the runaway success of season 1 and just how big of a phenomenon it became, how do you think the success of season 2 will be measured?
I think you will know pretty quickly. I think within the first week, you're going to start to see a bunch of posts about how huge this was and how many people watched it and how many minutes and how many eyeballs, or you will not see those things. And that is how we will know. I also think the thing you always want to look for is what other projects the creator gets picked up, where you see these faces, what their future deals are. What else they do is going to be fascinating.
Regina, last word to you. How do you think the success of this show will be measured?
I mean, again, like this is just like, my own personal opinion, but like just based on the first episode, like I do think it'll be a hit with audiences and it's going to be talked about regardless. That's my opinion. Like even if it's not as good as the first season, like I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be talking about it.
I am desperate to get to the reality where I will also be talking about it while also hiding under my blanket because that is how I like to experience the wonders of Squid Game. Regina and Kathryn, Michelle, I appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for your time, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Talk to you soon. I want to mention we recorded this conversation a few weeks ago, and since then, Squid Game director Hwang Dong-hyuk has addressed the controversy around casting a man for a trans woman character. He told TV Guide, quote, "When we research in Korea, there are close to no actors that are openly trans, let alone openly gay." And he went on to explain some more context about LGBTQ plus society in Korea that Michelle Cho also shared earlier. Michelle Cho is a professor with the Department of East Asian Studies at the University of Toronto. Regina Kim is a freelance entertainment journalist journalist and Forbes contributor focusing on Korean pop culture. She's in New York. And Kathryn VanArendonk is a TV critic for Vulture. She's in Westfield, New Jersey. Squid Game Season 2 is out now on Netflix. And that is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. We'll see you tomorrow.